The wise sage Peter Parker, also known as Spider-Man, once said, "With great power comes great responsibility." I remember I was probably in high school when that movie came out. I remember thinking about, that's so deep. Spider-Man. I wonder if Spider-Man, though, had ever read the section of the Gospel of Mark that we're going to read today. I do wonder, does Spider-Man read the Bible? I don't know. Maybe he does. You see, the passage we're going to read today from the Gospel of Mark is about leadership. How many of you are leaders? Raise your hand. Are you a leader? Okay. All right. Maybe you're a leader at home. Maybe you're a leader at school. Maybe you're a leader at work or in the church, in your community or neighborhood. I would argue, though, that there's a sense in which everybody is a leader. Even if you're not the boss at work, or even if maybe you don't have any children, so you don't lead them. Or I would argue, though, that there's a sense in which everybody is a leader. Because even if you're not leading other people, you're at least leading yourself. Think about it, you're managing yourself, you're overseeing yourself, your own life. And so I think there's a sense in which everybody is a leader in some way. And so we need to listen closely to Jesus' words today as he teaches us what it means to lead according to his kingdom. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 10. Mark chapter 10 is rounds out our sub-series here in the Gospel of Mark. We've been looking at Mark 8 through 10 over the past several weeks, couple months actually. And in Mark 8 through 10, Jesus is on this epic journey from Caesarea Philippi, the most remote point in the Gospel of Mark, traveling south to Jerusalem, the center of the Jewish world, the holy city. And it's in Jerusalem, of course, that Jesus predicts 3 times during this journey from Caesarea Philippi to Jerusalem that he is going to die. He's going to be betrayed, rejected, condemned to death. He's going to be killed, and he's going to rise again. And so we have today in Mark chapter 10, verse 32, we're going to look at the third and final time, Jesus predicts his suffering and death and resurrection in the Gospel of Mark. So let's begin in verse 32. It says, they were on their way up to Jerusalem. Now they're going up to Jerusalem because they're climbing a mountain. Jerusalem sits upon Mount Zion. And in order to get to Jerusalem, even though they're traveling south from Caesarea Philippi, they are traveling up a mountain to get to the holy city. So they were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way. And the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, the reason they're astonished and afraid is because Jesus has said previously 2 different times, when I get to Jerusalem, I'm going to die. And so as they're following Jesus, where is Jesus going? Jerusalem. They're terrified. What's going to happen when we get to Jerusalem? Jesus has been saying he's going to die. He's going to suffer. He's going to be arrested and tortured and betrayed, and he's going to be killed. So they're afraid to follow Jesus. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. Verse 33. We are going up to Jerusalem, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him, and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. See, this stay in Jerusalem is going to be their final week with Jesus. The disciples have spent three years with Jesus, learning from him, hearing his teaching, watching his miracles. They've even been sent out from him a couple times now to go and to continue Jesus' missionary work of teaching and healing. They've even been sent out from him. But here they are. It's all leading up to the final week. And in fact, the whole Gospel of Mark really is slowing down at this point. The last 6 chapters of the Gospel of Mark, Mark 11 through 16, is all going to account for the final week of Jesus' life and his death and his resurrection. We'll begin looking at that next week, beginning in Mark 11. But it's all slowing down as we get to the most important moments in the life of Jesus. So they're on the doorstep of Jerusalem, and Jesus is trying to prepare his disciples for what's ahead. He's giving it one last shot. Because remember, each time Jesus has predicted his death, remember the disciples have been like, no, you're not going to die. Or don't I get to be the most important person in the kingdom of heaven? Remember, they had these crazy responses to the things after Jesus had predicted his suffering, they had these crazy responses and didn't seem to understand the implications for their own lives. But Jesus is here predicting one more time to prepare his disciples in what is like the honeymoon phase of the ministry. He's going to prepare them for when things get tough. When things get tough. When he's going to have to suffer. And they too will be called to suffer. So like the other two predictions, though, the disciples here are clueless. I mean, even though Jesus has just explained, and this prediction is more brutal than the previous two predictions, Jesus has said not just that he'll be handed over and betrayed to the leaders who will kill him, but Jesus said he's going to be betrayed twice. He's going to be betrayed and given over to the Jewish religious leaders. He's going to be betrayed by those religious leaders. The very people he had come to save, the Jewish people, the leadership is going to betray him and hand him over to Gentiles, to Roman officials. And then when they get their hands on the Son of God, they're going to mock and spit upon, torture, beat, and kill him. These are brutal, brutal predictions from Jesus. It's almost like the weight of the cross is already on his shoulders as he's on the doorstep of Jerusalem and he knows what's coming. But even still, Jesus is holding on to the hope of resurrection. Because in each of his predictions, he says, and 3 days later, the Son of Man will rise. He knows that God has his back. He knows that God will vindicate him. Even should he be killed, God will bring him back to life. But just like the other two predictions, the disciples are clueless. Here's how they respond to Jesus. Two of them specifically, James and John. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Verse 36, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked. And they replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. James and John are crazy, aren't they? I mean, they just heard Jesus say, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, be betrayed, mocked, tortured, and killed. 3 days later, God will bring me back from the dead. But that's going to happen to me. And James and John's, the way they respond to that is, okay, whatever. But, when the kingdom comes, we get to be in positions of honor, right? We get to be the two most important people in your kingdom, correct? On your right and on your left. Like, how clueless are they? Jesus is already feeling the cross. And James and John are like, we're your favorites, right? Just clueless. But here's the thing, before we pick on, it's like so easy for me to pick on James and John and think, man, they're like almost like little kids who just don't get it. And it's so easy for me to pick on them, but I can identify this attitude in my heart. Can you? Can you see these kind of attitudes in your own heart? You see, it is our sinful human nature to use power for self. James and John have this wonderful privilege to be part of Jesus' inner circle. And so how are they thinking about that? How are they thinking of using that privilege for themselves to acquire places of honor in the kingdom? Sinful human nature. Over the past couple of weeks, the news cycle has reminded us Christians about the pervasive, horrific, and heartbreaking problem of sexual abuse in churches. Even though the Roman Catholic Church has often been in the spotlight simply because it's the largest church in the world, headlines have come out, investigations have uncovered that this is a systemic problem, not just in Catholic churches, but in Protestant churches, The Southern Baptist Convention was recently named in an investigation. Pastors, church leaders, taking advantage of people entrusted to their care, taking advantage of people sexually. You know, this is an extreme, obviously, an extreme example of the abuse of power, even in Christian circles. I understand that this is extreme, but it's so real. You know, we're brilliant people when it comes to pursuing our own self-interest at the expense of others. Our sinful hearts just find ways to do that. I don't even know if I want to take much time to prove this to everybody right now because I think it's obvious. I mean, just look at the news. It's one prominent person after another, politician, whatever, spending more time defending themselves than caring for people. Just look at our own social circles. How much energy and time and thought and passion people, maybe ourselves, put into promoting ourselves as opposed to looking out for the other, caring for people in our circles. Just look at our hearts. I don't know about you, but for me at least, the temptation to take advantage of others, even in small ways, is always there. It's always there. And I bet we each give into that more often than we'd like to admit. But Jesus is going to answer James and John. He doesn't promise them one way or another that he'll actually take them up on their favor. But here's how Jesus responds. He says in verse 38, "You don't know what you are asking." The irony here is thick. Follow along with this. Jesus says, "You don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" I mean, here's what Jesus is saying. The cup Jesus drinks and the baptism Jesus is going to be baptized with is the cup and the baptism of suffering. It's the cross. In the scriptures, the cup is a symbol of your destiny. It's your fate. Baptism is what you have to experience and go through in order to be born again. The Old Testament people of Israel had to be baptized in the Red Sea, come out on the other side, and brought into the promised land. Christians, too, are baptized. We're put under water. And, of course, it's Jesus who suffered. I mean, nobody, as far as I know, at Calvary has ever suffered when we're baptized. You're under for a split second. But it's identifying with the suffering of Christ, what he did on your behalf. So, and then when you're brought out, you're part of the family of God. That's what it's symbolizing. And Jesus says, can you drink the cup that I have to drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? And James and John, they have obviously don't understand what Jesus is saying because they say, we can. They don't understand that what Jesus is talking about the cross. Jesus is saying, are you going to take up your cross? Is that what you're asking? That you're going to go through the cross in order to get to resurrection on the other side? That you're going to put yourself up on my cross? And James and John say, we can. And Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. In other words, Jesus is saying, James, John, you will suffer. Jesus knows that even though James and John, they're clueless now, they'll get it. They'll get it. He knows their hearts. He knows the trajectory God has them on. He knows they're going to grow. He knows once they see him die and rise and the Spirit will come, that it'll make sense to them. And they will give themselves, their lives even, for Jesus' cause, for the spread of his name and for the good of others. James, for example, is going to be of the 12 disciples, James is the first one martyred. Acts chapter 12, verse 2. James is the first one to be killed for Jesus. He's beheaded by King Herod. John will actually outlive the rest of the original 12 disciples. He'll outlive all of them, yet his life will be full of suffering. Most notably, John will spend the rest of his days on the Isle of Patmos. He'll be exiled to a prison island, like in Alcatraz. He'll be kept there. And that's where God will reveal to him a vision of King Jesus exalted and reigning over the universe, even though it looks like the whole world is broken and headed for destruction. Actually, Jesus is ruling. John will get this vision of King Jesus, and he'll write it down. It's the New Testament book of Revelation. So John and James both will indeed suffer, and Jesus knows that. But Jesus says, look, ultimately it's not for me to vindicate you. I'm not the one that will resurrect you. That ultimately belongs to God. God is ordaining. He's orchestrating these things. That's not up to me, Jesus says. When the 10 heard about this, verse 41, when the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. And Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, so think Caesar here, rulers of the Gentiles, Caesar, the officials, the people who are in charge of, it looks like they're in charge of the world. Jesus says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. They lord it over the people they rule. And their high officials exercise authority over them. Jesus says, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. That's how the kingdom works. You see, in Jesus' kingdom, the logic here is different than the world. For Jesus' kingdom, if you want to be great, if you want to be exalted, you need to suffer in order to be there. I mean, that's what was so ironic about James and John's request, is they wanted to be great, and Jesus was like, well, you will be great, you will be leaders in the church, but you're going to suffer to get there. It will lead to suffering. See, growing in Christ, becoming a mature Christian, having more power in your life, having power in your relationships as a Christian means automatically, if you want to follow Jesus, it means becoming more cross-shaped. It means looking more like Jesus. It means emptying yourself, considering all the privileges and power that you have and leveraging those, using those for the good of other people. That's what it means. To become a mature Christian doesn't just mean you become really smart, you know the Bible really well. It doesn't just mean you become a leader in the church and people do what you say. What it means is you lay your life down as a servant. You see, in Jesus' kingdom, power is for helping others. It's not for me, it's not for you, it's for everyone else. In Jesus' kingdom, husbands use their power not to dominate or exploit their wives, but to lovingly pursue and nurture them. In Jesus' kingdom, parents use their power not to extract affection from their kids or abuse their kids, but to teach and model cross-shaped Christ-likeness for them. In Jesus' kingdom, employers use their power not to extract every last little bit of productivity from their employees, but to fairly and generously meet their financial needs. In Jesus' kingdom, teachers use their power not to brainwash or belittle students, but to encourage and awaken lifelong learning in children for Jesus' name. In Jesus' kingdom, Christians who live in majority cultures use their power not to seek success for the majority group, but instead creatively think about ways to make sure that those without a voice, minorities, whether it's racial minorities, those without a voice like unborn children, they work to make sure those without a voice are heard too. Got a lot to think about there. Been thinking a lot about my political rights and all the privileges God has given me. And when I go to cast a vote, it's, first of all, that's an impossible decision. Have you noticed that? But what God has convicted in me when I go to cast a vote, that's a trust God has given me. When I go to cast a vote, am I casting that vote for selfish reasons? Or am I casting that vote for the glory of God and the good of others? There's no Keith in that vote when I cast it. That's what I want to try and do. That's an impossible task. I understand it's very complicated. But Christians should see even their political privileges, being a part of majority cultures, should see that as an opportunity to serve. That's a dynamic that we have power in. In Jesus' kingdom, church leaders use their power not to bolster their egos or pursue their preferences, but to disciple and care for church members. That's why you're a church leader. Can I take a second right now? We have an amazing group of leaders that I get to spend quite a bit of time with here at Calvary, and I call them servant leaders based on this text. I mean, this is where it comes from. We recently had, about a month ago, a gathering of a whole large group of servant leaders from Calvary, and we call it the Servant Leader Summit. And it's just a chance for us to get together to pray, to talk about servant leadership, to talk about our church's vision, mission, values, and to even tackle some specific issues that we might want to work on as a leadership. But can I just give a quick shout out to them? Because there's a weight of responsibility that goes along with being a servant leader. They don't just come and learn and grow, but they have this responsibility. They carry with them this call to be shepherds. They have this call to be caring for the flock. So if I could take a moment, and I want to invite our servant leaders to stand up. So if you were at that Servant Leader Summit or you were invited to it, that would be elders, staff, anybody that serves on our deacon or deaconess teams, missions, finance, facilities, congregational care, our life group leaders, women's ministry team. You guys pour yourselves out as leaders. Can I have you guys stand up really quick? Come on, don't be so... Yeah, I know, you don't serve for the spotlight, right? Guys, thank you so much. You guys are the best. You guys are the best. But being a church leader, it creates this power dynamic where you have this title suddenly. I read earlier this week, though, that when we get to heaven, Jesus doesn't care what title we had. Jesus is going to ask us, where's your towel that you washed people's feet with, right? Where's your towel? I love that idea. Church leaders have been entrusted with so much power, but that power is for discipling and caring for church members. And then lastly, have you ever thought about this? Our church has been entrusted with so much power. Our church, God has entrusted us with gifts, abilities, time. He's entrusted us with money, finances. He's entrusted us with facilities. He's entrusted us with a vision, with ministries. God has entrusted, He's given power to the church, to Calvary. But in Jesus' kingdom, churches use their power not to create a comfortable program for ourselves, but to strategically and relationally reach out to the needy and the unchurched in our community with the gospel, the good news of the love and truth of Jesus. I have this image in my mind of a church family that is more like a church body that goes around, and I just imagine in my mind, if Calvary were a body, this is such a silly image, but I literally have it in my mind. I imagine this 200-foot tall human being in Muskegon. And this human being is the church. It could be Calvary Church, it could be all the local churches in Muskegon. I just have in my mind that we're this 200-foot tall, this powerful, I think a third of Muskegon claims to be Christians and claims to go to church on a regular basis. That's a lot of people. That's 50,000 people in Muskegon. I just have this image in my mind of this giant walking around Muskegon, But how are we stewarding all that power? How are we stewarding ourselves? What's our posture towards the community? What's our posture towards the needy? What's our posture towards the unchurched, the lost who do not know Jesus, who do not know the hope and comfort of his love and truth? What is our posture? Are we going around as a giant stomping on the greater Muskegon area, or are we with the humility and servant-minded heart of Jesus? Are we on our knees washing the feet of folks in our community? What's our posture as a church? I love this idea that we as a church body all together are charged with serving not just ultimately our community, but even the rest of the world. Jesus has given us so much. In closing, Jesus wraps up this is my favorite verse in the Gospel of Mark. I'll just show my hand right there. This is my favorite verse. Jesus wraps up this whole section, this whole journey from Caesarea Philippi to Jerusalem. He's on the doorstep of Jerusalem. He wraps it all. Here's the punchline of Mark 8 through 10, right here. This is Jesus summing up who he is, what he's all about. This is it right here. This is what he wants his disciples to understand. He is calling them to be servants to one another, to their community in God's name. He's calling them because that's who he is. Verse 45, Jesus says, "For even the Son of Man," the Son of Man is Jesus' favorite title for himself in the Gospel of Mark. It has ties to the Old Testament. It's a title Jesus loves to use, as opposed to something like Son of God, which he is called in the Gospel of Mark. He just never uses those words himself. Jesus says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Just love these lines coming off Jesus' lips. The Son of God came into the world not so that people could serve him, but so that he could serve us in the deepest ways we needed it. And that was to become a ransom for us. What does it mean that Jesus gave his life as a ransom for many? Well, the scriptures very clearly teach that we've, and this should not be hard to prove, but it is hard for us to swallow. But the scriptures clearly teach that we have all sinned against a holy God. We have all sinned. I know what you're thinking. Come on, man. Am I really that bad? Am I really so bad that I deserve death? That I deserve like the wrath of God? That I deserve hell? Am I really that bad? I know that's so hard to swallow. For so many people that we interact with on a daily basis at work, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, am I really that bad? Do I really need God's forgiveness through Jesus? Am I really that bad? I mean, what the scriptures say is yes. If you believe the Bible, if you believe in the God of the Bible, the answer is yes. God is so holy, so good, so unlike us, not just in his power and in his knowledge and wisdom, but God is unlike us in his character. I mean, he's just totally different from us. Like where we might look at opportunities to take advantage of other people, God never does that. God never does that. He operates relating to people with purity, holiness, love, rightness to the core of who he is. So here's what that means. Even the tiniest bit of pride or selfishness automatically puts me at odds with him. The creator and judge of this universe cannot have pride and selfishness in his creation. It's just not, he just can't have that. He has to deal with it. He has to punish it. He has to kick it out. So, you and I are each far more sinful and unworthy of God than we would ever dare admit. Part of being a Christian, by the way, is owning. I'm broken beyond my own repair. I bear a guilt that I can't get rid of. I'm ashamed of my sin. That's part of being a Christian, becoming a Christian. It's like finally owning that, and I need God's forgiveness. So we are more sinful and unworthy than we'd ever dare admit. But we are each more loved than we ever dared hope. Jesus himself gave his whole self so that we might be reconciled to God. Jesus offered himself as the ransom. He offers himself as the ransom, the price that was paid to set us free from this fate of death that we have because of our sin. Our fate is God's wrath. Our fate is hell apart from forgiveness. But Jesus gave himself. He's the ransom. His life for ours. And that's why he went to the cross. I was telling one of my kiddos this week, very intense discussion. There's a lot going on, but part of the discussion, I was telling him that it was God's plan for Jesus to die all along. It was always part of God's plan. That's how he was going to rescue us from sin and from death. For those that believe and repent, it's always God's plan. And my child immediately said back to me, "That's mean. God is mean for planning Jesus' death." I was like, wow, that's actually really insightful that he would think about it like that. But when I explained to him that it was not only God's plan for Jesus to die, it was also Jesus' choice, his whole face changed. See, Jesus here is saying, I am choosing the cross. I am choosing the humiliation. I am choosing the torture. I am choosing death for your sake. That is who Jesus is. That's the kind of human he was. See, being cross-shaped is at the core of Jesus' identity and mission. And so what we have in the Gospel of Mark, what we have in this journey to Jerusalem, is Jesus teaching his disciples that even though he's God in the flesh, he will soon become, for their sake, God on a cross.